I was standing at my mother's graveside, watching them lower her casket into the ground when my phone buzzed. It was an automated email from building security. My badge access had been revoked. I wasn't even gone 24 hours, and the reason listed? Voluntary separation. I never quit, I never signed anything, but apparently, while I was burying my mother, my boss was burying my career. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this didn't happen overnight. This was calculated, this was planned, and I was too focused on my dying mother to see it coming. I'd worked at Meridian Financial Solutions for 6 years. 6 years of 70-hour weeks, missed holidays, and putting the company before everything else. I was a senior project manager in the compliance division, and I was good at my job, really good. 3 consecutive years of exceeding targets, 2 internal awards, a team that actually liked working for me. Then, 8 months ago, we got a new director. His name was Craig Hollister, and from the moment he walked through those doors, I knew we were going to have problems. Craig was brought in from a competitor after their compliance department imploded in a scandal. He was supposed to be this turnaround specialist, this miracle worker who'd save us from ourselves. What he actually was? A micromanager with a persecution complex and an ego the size of a small country. In his first week, he called me into his office. He didn't shake my hand, he didn't introduce himself properly. He just sat behind his desk and said, "I've been looking at your numbers. They're fine, but I think you've gotten comfortable." Comfortable? After 6 years of grinding myself into dust for this company? I tried to explain my track record, but he cut me off. I'm not interested in history. I'm interested in results. My results, under my leadership. We start fresh. That should have been my first red flag, but I had other things on my mind. My mother had just been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 to 12 months. I was trying to hold my work together while watching the woman who raised me slowly fade away. I told HR about my situation. I requested some flexibility, working from home 2 days a week so I could take her to treatments. Nothing crazy, just some accommodation during the hardest time of my life. HR approved it. Craig did not. "I don't do remote work," he told me when I brought him the signed approval form. "HR doesn't run this department. I do. You want flexibility, prove you deserve it." So I did. I worked harder than I ever had. I came in early on my office days. I stayed late. I answered emails at midnight. I took calls during my mother's chemotherapy sessions, stepping out into the hospital hallway to discuss quarterly reports while she sat hooked up to poison that was supposed to save her life. And you know what happened? Craig started documenting everything. Every small mistake, every minor delay, every time I left 5 minutes early to get to the hospital. 3 months in, he put me on a performance improvement plan, a PIP, after 6 years of stellar reviews. The stated reason? Failure to demonstrate consistent in-office presence and engagement. I fought it. I went to HR with my documentation, my completed projects, my client satisfaction scores, my team's feedback. They nodded sympathetically and said they'd look into it. 2 weeks later, they told me the PIP would stand. Craig had convinced them I was a liability. My mother got worse. The treatments weren't working. The cancer had spread to her liver, her lungs. The doctors stopped talking about months and started talking about weeks. I requested bereavement leave. Not yet, she was still alive, but I wanted to know what I was entitled to when the time came. HR told me I'd get 3 days. 3 days to bury my mother and somehow process the greatest loss of my life. Craig pulled me aside after he found out I'd made the request. "Planning ahead, I see," he said. There was something in his voice, something cold. "Just make sure you give adequate notice. We have a major audit coming up. I need all hands on deck." I stared at him. My mother is dying. And I'm sorry about that, but business doesn't stop for personal tragedy. My mother passed away on a Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand. She took one last breath, squeezed my fingers, and then she was gone. The woman who taught me to read, who worked 2 jobs to put me through college, who called me every Sunday just to hear my voice, she was gone. I called HR that afternoon. My voice was hollow. I told them I'd be taking my 3 days of bereavement leave starting immediately. They expressed condolences and said they'd inform my supervisor. The funeral was Thursday. It was a small service. My mother wasn't a flashy person, just close family, a few of her friends from church, my cousin who flew in from Seattle. I stood at the front of that chapel and delivered her eulogy with tears streaming down my face. Afterwards, we went to the cemetery. It was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I watched them lower my mother into the ground, and I felt something inside me break. That's when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, but something made me check. It was an automated email from Building Security Services, subject line, Vag Access Revocation Notice. I read it 3 times, standing there in that cemetery, my mother's grave not yet filled. Employee badge access has been revoked effective immediately. Reason, voluntary separation. Voluntary separation. I never quit. I never signed any paperwork. I was on approved bereavement leave. I need to stop here for a second, because I'm standing at my mother's grave, still in my funeral suit, reading an email that says I voluntarily quit a job I never left. Let me ask you something. What would you do? Subscribe if you think Craig deserves everything that's coming to him. Drop a comment if you've ever had a boss try to erase you like you never existed, because what I discovered next, it made my blood run cold. I left the cemetery in a daze. My family was concerned. They thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. But I told them I needed to handle something and drove straight to the office. It was 4 in the afternoon. The building was still open. I walked up to the entrance and swiped my badge. Red light. Access denied. I called the front desk security guard, a guy named Marcus, who I'd known for years. He came out looking uncomfortable. "Man, I'm sorry," he said. "They told us you resigned, said you sent in a letter this morning." I was at my mother's funeral this morning. His face went pale. I don't know what to tell you. You're in the system as terminated, voluntary." I asked him who authorized it. He checked his computer. Craig Hollister. He submitted the paperwork himself. I felt something snap. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something more focused. I went home and started documenting everything. Every email, every text, every approval from HR, the PIP they put me on, the leave request I'd filed, the confirmation I received. I screenshotted the security email showing the exact timestamp of my badge revocation, 12:17 in the afternoon. My mother was being lowered into the ground at 12:15. Then I made some calls, first to HR. The representative who answered sounded confused when I explained the situation. She put me on hold for 20 minutes. When she came back, her tone had changed. "Our records show you submitted a resignation letter via email this morning at 8:45 a.m. I was at a funeral home at 8:45 a.m., preparing to bury my mother. I understand this is a difficult time, but we have the documentation. Forward me that email, right now." She hesitated. "I'll need to check with my supervisor." I told her I'd wait. Another 15 minutes of hold music. Finally, she came back on. "I've been advised that we cannot share that documentation at this time due to ongoing internal review." Ongoing internal review. They were already covering their tracks. I called a lawyer that night. Not just any lawyer, an employment attorney who specialized in wrongful termination cases. Her name was Diana Chen, and she'd won some high-profile cases against major corporations. She listened to my story without interrupting. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "They forged your resignation letter. That's not just wrongful termination, that's fraud. And if they used company systems to do it, there's a digital trail." She told me not to contact anyone at the company again. Let her handle it. 2 weeks later, Diana had subpoenaed the company's email records, and what she found was damning. The email sent from my account was sent from an IP address inside the building, Craig's office specifically. The email was composed and sent while I was confirmed to be at the funeral home by multiple witnesses. Even better, Craig had CC'd himself on the email, but he'd forgotten to delete it from his sent folder. He literally wrote my resignation letter from his own computer, logged into my email, which he shouldn't have had access to, and submitted it to HR. But it got worse.
During discovery, Diana found a chain of emails between Craig and the VP of operations. In one of them, Craig wrote, "We need to move on this before he gets back from leave. Once he's out of the building, we can restructure the department without resistance. His mother dying is actually perfect timing." Perfect timing. He called my mother's death perfect timing. Diana also found evidence that Craig had been planning to promote his former colleague from his old company into my position. The job posting was already drafted, dated 2 days before my mother even passed away. We filed suit. Wrongful termination, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of FMLA protections. The company's legal team tried to settle immediately, offered me 6 months' salary to go away quietly. Diana laughed at them. "Your client forged documents, violated federal leave laws, and celebrated a woman's death in writing. We'll see you in court." The case never made it to trial. It didn't need to. The story leaked to the press. I'm not sure how. Suddenly, Meridian Financial Solutions was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. Clients started pulling their accounts. The board of directors launched an internal investigation. Craig was fired within a month. Not just fired, escorted out by security in the middle of the day. I heard he tried to get jobs at other financial firms, but the story followed him. Last I checked, he was doing consulting work for small businesses, a far cry from the executive suite he thought he deserved. The VP who approved his scheme was also terminated. HR underwent a complete restructure. 3 people in that department lost their jobs for failing to follow proper verification procedures. As for me, the settlement was substantial. I won't give exact numbers, but I paid off my mortgage, set up a scholarship fund in my mother's name, and took a year off to grieve properly. When I finally went back to work, it was at a company that actually valued its employees, a place where HR means it when they say they're there to help. I still think about that moment at the cemetery sometimes, standing there with my phone in my hand, my mother not yet covered by earth, reading that I'd voluntarily abandoned everything I'd worked for. They thought they could erase me in my darkest hour. They thought grief would make me weak. They were wrong.
Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been mistreated by a terrible boss or witnessed workplace injustice, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week because no one should have to suffer in silence. And if you have your own workplace horror story, drop it in the comments or send it to us directly. Your story could be featured in our next video. Stay strong out there. See you in the next one.